The galaxy was wide and endless, filled with billions of stars, but for the dying alien world of Therai, it felt smaller than ever. The skies above their home were red with fire, the air filled with smoke that burned the lungs, and the ground shook under the weight of destruction. Once, Therai had been a proud world, filled with shining cities and great wisdom. Now the cities were silent ruins, and the people were shadows of what they had been. Their enemy had come without warning, a vast armada that left no mercy in its path. Entire fleets were broken in days. Defenses that had stood for centuries fell like paper against the invaders. The Therai pleaded to the Galactic Council for aid, begging for weapons, soldiers, even a single promise of protection. But the council chambers remained cold. The council had rules that said weak species should stand on their own, rules that said intervention was dangerous, rules that protected order more than life. And so the Therai plea was silenced, ignored, left to drift in the void. For many nights, the alien leaders gathered in secret chambers lit only by dying torches. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. They knew the end was coming, yet still they clung to a single hope. They would send one last, desperate message. Not to the council, not to their neighbors who had turned away, but to the stars themselves. A signal cast into the black sea of space, carrying nothing but words of pain. "Help us," the message cried. "Our people are dying. We are burning. Is there no one who will hear us?" The signal was weak, broken by the static of ruined transmitters, but it traveled across the arms of the galaxy, past silent worlds, past the stations where merchants whispered of Therai's doom. It traveled far, into regions no one of power cared for, into the edge where forgotten systems slept. Days passed, weeks. The Therai stopped hoping. Their message had vanished like all their prayers. Children died in the streets, elders sat in silence, and warriors sharpened blades that could not win against ships of fire. The galaxy had turned away. The galaxy had chosen to forget them, but then, on a quiet night when the leaders gathered once more, the static screens came alive. A voice spoke, strange, unlike any they had heard before. It was not the voice of the council. It was not the voice of any known empire. It was calm, steady, yet filled with something rare. "We heard you," the voice said. "This is Earth. This is humanity. We are coming." At first, they thought it was a mistake, a dream made from desperation. Humanity? Few in the galaxy spoke of them. A young species, untested, their name barely recorded in the archives. How could such a world dare to answer when giants had turned away? Yet the message repeated, clear and strong. "You are not alone. Hold on. We will stand with you." The Therai stared at one another, confusion and disbelief mixing with something they had not felt in years. Hope, small, fragile, like the first spark of fire in endless cold. Across the broken world, the news spread like a storm. The humans had answered. Mothers whispered it to children before sleep. Soldiers spoke of it as they tightened their armor. Even the dying looked to the skies, wondering who these strangers were that dared to do what the mighty would not. In the high towers of the council, whispers began to rise. Some laughed at the message, calling humanity reckless. Others frowned, uneasy, for there was danger in any species that chose to act when the galaxy ordered silence. On Therai, though, the people no longer cared for the council's laughter. They looked to the stars with new eyes. The humans were coming. Whether they were saviors or fools, they had heard the desperate cry. They had answered when no one else would, and so the stage was set. A ruined world waited, caught between death and hope. A young species prepared to step forward into the gaze of the galaxy. And somewhere in the endless dark, ships of Earth began. Their journey, carrying with them not only weapons and supplies, but a message the galaxy would never forget. because when no one else answered the plea of the dying, humanity did. The alien world of Therai was broken, yet its people waited. For days they stood in silence under the red skies, watching the heavens as if they might split open with salvation. They did not know what to expect. They had heard stories of humans, whispers from traders, fragments of tales about a small, blue planet far from the heart of the galaxy. Some said humans were bold and reckless, others called them stubborn and dangerous, but no one had ever claimed that humans were saviors. The first sign came not as thunder, but as a flicker of light. Across the upper atmosphere, a line of ships cut through the smoke and fire, their hulls scarred, not with arrogance, but with use. They were not the massive dreadnoughts of the Council, nor the sleek armadas of the older empires. The human ships were simple, practical, built for endurance rather than display. Yet in the eyes of the dying Therai, they were more beautiful than any fleet in history. As the ships descended, the ground shook. Crowds gathered near the old starports, where runways were cracked and towers lay in ruins. The survivors whispered prayers, some in disbelief, others in trembling gratitude. Could these really be the ones who had answered their plea? Could salvation truly come from so small a people? The first human stepped onto the soil of Therai. His suit was scratched, his helmet plain, but the way he walked was steady. Behind him came others, moving with careful discipline. They carried crates of food, water, and medicine. No banners, no flags, no declarations of power, only aid. Their eye leaders approached cautiously, their cloaks torn, their faces lined with despair. One of them spoke, voice heavy with doubt. "Why are you here? No one else came. Why would you?" The human leader removed his helmet. His face was pale compared to their bronze skin, but his eyes held a fire that did not waver. "Because you asked for help," he said simply, "and we could not ignore it." The words were strange to the Therai, almost childlike in their simplicity. The Council always demanded bargains, exchanges, and oaths of loyalty. Empires moved only for gain. Yet these humans spoke as though aid itself was reason enough. Children ran forward first, too young to fear, reaching for the water and food. Soldiers came next, their pride fighting against their hunger, but their hands shaking as they accepted the supplies. The humans gave freely, asking for nothing in return. News spread fast. Across the broken world, voices whispered of the newcomers. Some called them fools. How could such a small species stand against the wrath of the invaders? Others called them heroes, blessed by the stars themselves. But none could deny one truth. The Therai were no longer alone. High above, human engineers studied the wreckage of the alien defenses. They patched broken shields, rebuilt simple weapons, and trained Therai fighters to use them again. Their methods were rough, even strange, but effective. Where others saw ruins, the humans saw opportunity. Where others saw defeat, they saw a challenge to overcome. Not everyone welcomed them. Some of the Therai elders feared this alliance, warning that the Council would punish both species. "The humans do not know what they risk," one elder whispered. "When the Council comes, they will crush them as easily as they crushed us." But the younger generation did not listen. They had seen humanity's eyes, seen the way they refused to turn away. They had felt the warmth of food in their stomachs, the cool touch of medicine healing their wounds. For them, it was no longer about fear of the Council. It was about survival, and perhaps something greater. Meanwhile, in the grand halls of the Galactic Council, unease grew. Reports reached them of Earth's interference. A young species had broken the sacred laws of non-intervention. Some scoffed, calling Earth a minor nuisance. Others frowned, sensing danger in their defiance. The Council had long ruled through silence and fear. A single act of rebellion could spread like fire through dry grass. Back on Therai, the humans continued their work. They did not act like conquerors. They lived among the people, slept in the ruins, shared their meals. Slowly, a bond formed, one of trust, one of loyalty. For the first time in years, the Therai began to dream of tomorrow. But even as hope grew, shadows gathered. The enemy had not forgotten. The invaders prepared their next strike, and this time they would not only face a dying world, but the stubborn will of humanity. The Therai stood upon the cliffs one night, looking at the human campfires glowing in the dark. The leader of their council whispered to herself, "Why do they do this? Why do they risk everything for us?" And though no answer came, she felt it in her heart. Humanity was different. Humanity could not walk away from a cry for help. What the Therai did not yet know was that this was only the beginning. The council was watching. The enemy was waiting. And humanity, untested by the galaxy but forged in its own struggles, was about to show the stars why their answer would change everything. The arrival of humanity on Therai had changed everything. What had once been a world of silence and despair was now filled with the sound of hammers rebuilding, voices training, and ships moving in the sky. The Therai were alive again, carried forward by the strange fire of their new allies. But not everyone in the galaxy shared this hope. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, the air was heavy with unease. The councillors sat in their great circle, each one representing a mighty species, their eyes fixed on the glowing reports projected before them. The words were clear. Earth had broken the sacred rules. Humanity had stepped where no young species was allowed to go. They had interfered, and worse, they had done it openly. Some laughed. A backwater planet dares to challenge the Council's authority? They are children playing at war. Others frowned. Children can grow. Children can spread fire. If they inspire other worlds to resist, the order we have built for centuries will crack. The Council had survived not by kindness, but by control. When worlds cried for help, silence was the answer. It was this silence that kept smaller civilizations afraid, obedient, and weak. But now humanity had shattered that silence, and the Council could not allow it to stand. On Therai, the humans worked without pause. Soldiers drilled in ruined courtyards, guided by human commanders who taught them how to fight with speed instead of strength, with adaptation instead of fear. Engineers turned broken wreckage into weapons again. The Therai watched in awe. Humans did not see ruins, they saw possibilities. At night, the Therai leaders met with the human captain. His name was Elias, a man with tired eyes and a steady voice. Around the firelight, he spoke plainly. "The Council will come. They cannot ignore this. We must be ready." The Therai elder shook his head. "You do not understand their power. Their fleets are endless. Their laws are unshakable. When they come, they will not only destroy us, they will destroy you." But Elias only looked at the stars. "Maybe, but we do not walk away from those in need, not on Earth, not anywhere." His words spread across Therai like another kind of weapon, not of metal, but of spirit. The people who had once accepted death now began to believe in defiance, yet the shadows grew. Scouts brought word that council fleets were moving, small at first, then larger, gathering near the edge of Therai space. The message was clear. They were preparing to strike, to crush this rebellion before it could spark across the galaxy. Fear returned to the Therai hearts, but this time it was met with something else. Resolve. For the first time in centuries, they had allies who refused to bow. Humanity's presence was like a shield, thin but unbreakable in spirit. Still, doubt gnawed at them. Why did humanity do this? What did they truly gain? The galaxy had always taught them that no one acted without self-interest. Yet when the Therai asked, the humans only gave the same answer: "Because you needed us." The Council sent a warning, A transmission filled the skies above Therai, a voice booming across every channel. Withdraw! Leave the Therai to their fate. Earth has no place in the affairs of the galaxy. Obey or be destroyed. The message was met with silence. The Therai waited, afraid of what the humans would decide. Would they finally retreat? Would they abandon this doomed world under the weight of fear? But the humans did not leave. Their ships stayed in orbit, their soldiers remained on the ground, and when Captain Elias finally answered the council, his words were quiet, almost calm, but sharp as steel. We heard their cry, "We will not abandon them. If you come for them, you come for us." The Therai who heard those words trembled, not with fear but with awe. Never had anyone spoken to the council that way. Never had anyone dared to defy them so openly. The council's fury was immediate. Fleets moved faster, armies were prepared. Across the galaxy, whispers spread about a small world called Earth that dared to break the silence. Some species laughed, certain that humanity would be crushed. Others watched with hidden hope, wondering if this spark might be the beginning of something greater. On Therai, the tension was like a storm building on the horizon. The people trained harder. The humans built stronger defenses. Every night, the stars above seemed to flicker with the approach of danger. The galaxy was waiting for the clash, and deep inside, the Therai began to understand what made humanity different. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. But they carried something the galaxy had long forgotten, the will to stand. Even when defeat was certain, the storm was coming, and humanity, unshaken, prepared to face it head-on. The warning had been spoken, and the council had given humanity a choice: retreat or be crushed. Humanity's answer was silence at first, then defiance. The message echoed across the galaxy. Earth would not abandon Therai, and so the fleets began to move. From the far reaches of the council's space came ships of iron and fire. Armadas larger than anything the Therai had ever seen gathered like storm clouds at the edge of their system. To the council, it was not war. It was punishment, a lesson. A small blue planet had broken the rules, and it would be made an example. Before the galaxy, on Therai, the air was heavy with fear. Mothers held their children close, warriors stood in broken armor, and leaders whispered prayers. They had seen these fleets before, and they knew the outcome. Against such power there could be no victory, yet when they looked to the humans, they saw no fear. The humans were preparing, moving with a calm that seemed almost unreal. Captain Elias stood on the command deck of his flagship, eyes fixed on the incoming swarm of red dots flashing across the star map. Around him, officers worked in silence, their hands moving over controls with steady discipline. They knew what was coming, and they knew they were outnumbered, but none of them spoke of retreat. The first clash began above the broken skies of Therai. A wave of council cruisers broke through the dark, their weapons glowing with deadly light. The humans rose to meet them. Their ships were smaller, their weapons less advanced, but their movements were sharp and unpredictable. Where council ships moved in rigid formations, humanity fought like hunters in the wild, fast, adaptive, striking from angles no one expected. The Therai watched from the ground, their broken towers shaking as fire lit the heavens. They had expected to see their protectors destroyed in moments, but instead they saw something else. Humanity bled, yes, their ships cracked under the storm of enemy fire. But every time one ship fell, another struck back with fury. Every time a formation broke, the humans adapted. They did not scatter, they did not kneel. Down on the surface, Therai soldiers fought beside human marines as council dropships poured warriors into the ruins. The humans were relentless. They moved through fire and ash, dragging the wounded to safety, standing in the open to hold a line that should have broken. Their voices carried across the battlefield, not filled with despair, but with command. Hold the ground! Push them back! For the first time, Therai warriors felt their fear give way to something stronger. They stood shoulder to shoulder with humans, lifting their weapons not for survival, but for defiance. They had believed themselves broken, but the humans taught them a new way to fight, not with strength of arms, but with strength of will. The council had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves slowed, frustrated. Human tactics were strange. Sacrifice here, a sudden strike there. They fought like no other species, reckless yet precise, willing to take risks no one else dared. And slowly, to the council's shock, the battlefield tilted. On the third day of battle, the impossible happened. A council dreadnought, massive and unstoppable, burned in the skies above Therai. Humanity had found its weakness, striking with a swarm of smaller ships that moved like knives through the dark. The fall of the dreadnought sent shockwaves through both armies. The Therai cheered, the council seethed, but victory was not yet theirs. Humanity had won battles, not the war. For every council ship that burned, more waited beyond the stars. For every line that held, another wave was forming. The Therai looked to their allies, wondering how long this resistance could last. In the council chambers, the fury was growing. The humans had not only resisted, they had embarrassed the council before the galaxy. Species that had lived in silence, for centuries now, whispered of Earth. Some began to hope, others began to fear, but none could ignore. And still, the humans fought. Elias stood once more before his people, his voice calm, though his uniform was torn and his face lined with exhaustion. We have shown them that we will not break. We have shown them that no power, no council can silence those who choose to stand together. His words carried to the Therai, and they repeated them in their own tongues. Hope had become more than whispers. It had become fire. The first clash had ended, but the war was only beginning. Humanity had stood where no one else dared, and the galaxy had seen it. The council would return, stronger, angrier, and determined to crush this defiance once and for all. But something had changed. Humanity had proven that even giants could bleed, and that truth was more dangerous than any fleet. The first clash had shaken the galaxy. The council had expected to crush the humans in days, yet they had been forced into retreat, their dreadnoughts burning, their armies held back by those they once called weak. Across the stars, whispers spread of Earth, the young world that dared to stand. Some called them reckless, others called them doomed, but all spoke their name. Humanity was no longer unseen. Humanity was rising. On Therai, the skies were quiet for a short time. Broken ships drifted like corpses in orbit, flames fading into ash. The survivors looked to the heavens with both hope and fear. They had seen the humans bleed. They had seen them fight with courage unlike anything in living memory. But they also knew the council would not forgive. This was not the end. It was only the pause before the storm. Captain Elias stood among his soldiers, his armor scarred, his voice steady, though his body ached with exhaustion. "They will return," he said to both human and Therai alike, "and they will come with everything they have. They want to erase us, to erase this choice we made together. We will not let them." In the chambers of the council, the decision was made. There would be no more warnings, no more half measures. An armada greater than anything the galaxy had ever seen was assembled. Hundreds of warships, legions of soldiers, weapons capable of burning worlds. It was not simply a war, it was a judgment. Humanity and Therai would be made examples, their defiance erased, so that none would dare to follow. The day came when the skies above Therai darkened again. Not with smoke this time, but with ships so vast they eclipsed the stars. Entire formations of destroyers, cruisers, and dreadnoughts stretched across the void. The Therai trembled, remembering the fire that had nearly destroyed them. But when they looked to the humans, they saw no trembling. They saw resolve. The Council Armada unleashed its fury. Blinding beams fell from orbit, tearing craters into the planet's surface. The ground shook as fire rained from the heavens. On the surface, human and Therai soldiers braced together in trenches carved from ruins. They did not run. They raised their weapons and prepared to fight. Above, the human fleet engaged. Outnumbered 10-1, outgunned by technology centuries older, they moved like wolves among giants. They used every scrap of knowledge, every trick, every ounce of daring. Small ships dove into the blind spots of massive dreadnoughts, striking at engines and weak points. Coordinated squads sacrificed themselves to cripple ships far larger than their own. Humanity's style of war was not built on size. It was built on adaptation, on never yielding, on turning desperation into strategy. The battle raged for hours, then days. The Council pressed harder, unleashing waves of soldiers on the surface. The fighting in the ruins was brutal. Humans and Therai fought side by side, shoulder to shoulder, their voices carrying across the smoke. "Stand your ground, do not break." And slowly, the impossible began to happen. For every ship humanity lost, another Council vessel fell. For every soldier that fell in the streets of Therai, another rose to take their place. Humanity's defiance spread like fire, igniting the Therai with a strength they thought long dead. The galaxy watched. From distant worlds and hidden colonies, countless species tuned into secret transmissions of the battle. They saw the Council unleash all its might. They saw humanity refuse to yield, and something changed in their hearts. If Earth could resist, why not them? If Earth could defy the Council, then perhaps the galaxy was not bound by silence forever. At last, the final strike came. The Council's greatest flagship, a Leviathan armed with weapons that could shatter continents, descended into the heart of the system. It fired once, ripping through mountains. It prepared to fire again, this time to erase Therai itself. But the humans did not run. Every remaining ship, every fighter, every scrap of metal still able to move, rallied to Elias's command. They charged, reckless and fearless, throwing themselves into the path of the giant. Explosions lit the void as one by one they struck, their sacrifice tearing into the monster. And in that storm of fire, the flagship broke apart, splitting into burning fragments that fell into the dark. The silence that followed was heavy, endless. The Council fleet, leaderless and shaken, began to retreat. Their judgment had failed. Their example had turned into shame. Humanity and Therai stood bloodied, but alive. On the surface, the people emerged from the ruins. They saw the human survivors, standing tall, their banners raised not in conquest, but in solidarity. And they wept, not in despair this time, but in gratitude, for they knew what had happened here was not just victory. It was a promise. Captain Elias looked to the stars, his voice carried on broken transmitters across every channel. We are not the strongest. We are not the oldest. But we will never ignore a cry for help. This is humanity's answer. Remember it. Across the galaxy, the words echoed. Humanity had spoken not only with weapons, but with action, and the galaxy would never forget. Because when no one else answered the plea of the desperate, humanity did. And by doing so, they changed the destiny of every world that watched.